Chapter 9 The Nest of Gold. Why, come in, Harold. It's surely a pleasant surprise to see you, exclaimed George Hibbard. He turned his head on the pillow and looked up in response to the boy's knock. It's good to see you once again, too, Mr. Hibbard. Harold smiled down at the happy-faced paralytic before he quickly looked all around the big, gaily pampered, book-filled room overlooking Harney Valley. My, I've missed you in Burns, Oregon. It doesn't seem possible that it's been almost 2 years since I visited at Uncle Robert's home. I'd about decided that I'd never get over here again. Something seemed to go wrong every time we'd plan a trip. But here I am at last, and all ready and waiting to hear what you've been doing. Have you taken any trips? Indeed, I have, nodded George. In fact, I travel quite often. For now, I spend some time each year with my sister Frances near Boise, Idaho, and some weeks at the homes of my two sisters, Roberta and Hazel, in Portland, Oregon. Eugenia's husband has been very ill, and she has had her time fully occupied with his care. So I've just packed up and gone a visiting. Of course, my packing was done for me, and I'm still completely paralyzed from the neck down. But I'm constantly grateful for my many remaining blessings: my kind relatives, my eyesight, my hearing, speech, the power of thought, the ability to use my electric typewriter. Oh, I've much for which to be thankful, Harold. I'm able to type quite well by holding that long stick in my mouth and barely touching the electronic typewriter keys with it. You can't imagine what a new world the electric typewriter has opened up for me. For the first time in these long, long years since my diving accident, I'm able to express my thoughts without waiting for some busy friend or member of the family to come and do my writing for me. As soon as I can type well enough, I'm going to try to sell some of my wildlife articles to the nature magazines. Oh, that would be wonderful, agreed Harold. Just think of the thousands of people who could read your true stories in the monthly publications. Why, I've been waiting 2 years to hear you tell me about the nest of gold. I was expecting you to mention that, chuckled the brown-faced man, flashing even white teeth in a broad smile. You see, I haven't forgotten that I promised to tell you that particular adventure. Have you guessed what it is? Well, I've wondered, Harold confessed, and the only answer I've been able to figure out is that you folks stumbled across a vein of gold or an old miner's catch. Am I right? No, you're wrong that time, laughed George. However, I really didn't expect you to know the answer. And after 2 years, I won't keep you guessing any longer. I'll tell you the story of the two eagles who came from the nest of gold. Eagles in a nest of gold? But I don't understand. Harold burst forth excitedly. Surely there aren't any eagles here in Oregon. Why, I always thought that the large eagles lived only in the eastern United States. No, indeed, Harold. Many people are very much surprised to learn that the golden eagle now is found only in the western mountains. The golden eagle? Oh, now I understand, Harold cried. He sat forward excitedly on the edge of his chair. You must have found a nest with young eagles in it. But where? Here, here, laughed George. One thing at a time. First, let me tell you a little about the two eagles. The majestic bald eagle, so called because of his white feathered head, and the equally large golden eagle. Both of them have a wingspan of over 7 feet. As you no doubt know, the bald eagle is the national emblem of the United States, as adopted by an act of Congress on June 20, 1782. It is an interesting fact that Benjamin Franklin, who was one of the committee members, thought that the turkey was far more fitting bird for the choice and called the eagle a coward and a thief. But the general opinion has always been that the eagle is a noble bird and one that has the mastery of the air. This bird is found over the continent's forested regions, but as I stated, the golden eagle is now found only in the West. Here in Harney Valley, we find the bald eagle on the north side in the timber region and the golden eagle down toward the Double O Ranch and the Narrows, a narrow passage between Harney and Hulard Lakes. It was near the Narrows that Dad's golden eagle was captured. One of the Basque sheepmen was driving his car slowly over the rough road when he suddenly came upon a large eagle. It was so busy devouring a rabbit carcass that it failed to take off in time. Imagine the poor man's surprise when the big bird flew up, crashed through the car windshield, and fell on the back seat. In spite of face and hand wounds made by the jagged flying glass, the man grabbed a gunny sack and, while the powerful bird was still stunned, forced it into the protecting bag. Of course, it was his intention to bring it to Dad, for everyone knew his interest in birds and animals. When Dad cautiously opened the sack at the entrance to a large covered pen, he found that one of the eagle's wings had been hurt in the accident, but that he was not particularly vicious. However, as Dad eyed those huge claws, which with one jerk could rip open a small animal, he kept a respectful distance and hastily shut the wire door upon the captive. Till the eagle's wing had healed completely, Dad kept it safely in this shelter, feeding it upon the jackrabbits that he shot each day and skinned. He had learned that too much rabbit fur would sicken an eagle, and of course he wished to make the bird well and strong. When the injured wing was completely healed, Dad turned the bird loose. As we stood and watched him mount joyfully up into the blue sky, we wished that he might have been given the power of speech, if only for a moment, so that he could have expressed his thoughts to us. But why didn't Dr. Hibbard keep him all the time? Harold questioned. I'd have thought he'd want to keep such a valuable specimen. Oh, no, George hastily answered. That wasn't Dad's way. You see, for many years he was a member of the Oregon State Game Commission, for it had been his lifelong hobby to study and observe wild animals closely, so that he might know as much as possible about them. Do you remember my story about how he captured a tiny antelope and brought it here until it was grown? Mother said that he was always bringing home some wounded creature and nursing it back to health. As a result, he became an authority on wildlife. I can't think of a more worthwhile interest, can you? Indeed, I can't, earnestly agreed Harold. Well, smiled George, I must hurry along with my story. Before I begin the account of our family's actual view of an eagle's nest, I'd like to give you a short background history of the bald eagle. The bald eagle and golden eagle are alike in many respects, but one sure way of telling them apart is to examine closely the bird's lower legs. If the legs are featherless, it is a bald eagle. If the legs are covered with feathers, it's a golden eagle. The male and female eagles mate for life. And at the first hint of spring, began to build their nest atop a tall tree or on a high rocky ledge. The nest itself has about a 5 foot base of strong branches lined with leaves, twigs, and grass. Since the two eagles return each year to the same nest and add to it, the structure gradually becomes larger and larger. I once read that a bald eagle's nest that was 12 feet high and 1/2 feet across and 2 tons in weight. To this nest, the female lays two dull white eggs about 3 times the size of a hen's egg. Eggs are laid about the middle of February, and 31 days later the young are hatched. Oh, what do they look like? Eagerly questioned Harold. Are they pretty and fluffy like chicks? But no, laughed George. They're rather odd looking when first hatched. I'd say they're about 1/3 the size of a full grown chicken, and they're covered with soft, light gray down. At this time, they're quite helpless. It's only 3 weeks, however. This fuzz is replaced by a thicker and darker gray covering with traces of the large wing and tail feathers. And in about 6 weeks, they really begin to look like young eagles, for then they have most of their feathers. Can't they fly by this time? Asked Harold. No, they are about 12 weeks old, I believe, before they're able to fly and leave the nest. And even then, for some weeks, they come back to the nest to roost at night. I expect the male eagle is glad when this period is over, for he has had a full-time job, supplying his family with sufficient food. Now I must explain that although we called our discovery a nest of gold, it was really the bald eagle's nest that we found instead of one made by a golden eagle. But one of our younger members of the family, thinking at first that we really had sighted golden eagles in flight, gave it that name, and so it's called to this day. Dad had located this particular bald eagle's nest about 4 miles up the Silvies River on the old John Hipsman place. Since everyone rarely has access to an eagle's nest, Dad was delighted to have located this one high in the rimrock cliffs overlooking the river. For days he watched the mates building up the nest. Then for many more days he sighted through his field glasses until he was sure that the eagles had been safely hatched. It had been his intention to try to get close enough to photograph the birds, but alas, something happened to prevent this plan. What is it? Harold breathlessly inquired. Did your father get hurt? Oh, I hope not. Dad didn't get hurt. Nevertheless, on that particular occasion, there was real tragedy in the lives of the two little eagles. For some hunter new to the valley and new to the wise use of his gun saw the mother bird as she swooped down upon an unwary jackrabbit. As she came close, he lifted his gun, aimed, and fired. The mother eagle fell lifeless to the ground, leaving the little ones alone in the cold nest. Dad didn't lose any time after that. Quickly he rode home and rounded up his nature-loving children. He selected stout rope, and at once the folks rode up the river and climbed high up on the rim rock above the eagle's ire. Of course, they were extremely careful to watch for the father bird. I suspect that ordinarily he would have been hovering overhead, ready to swoop down and savagely attack anything that threatens harm to his little family. But for once, he was away. Perhaps he had discovered the limp body of his mate and was circling back and forth over the spot. At any rate, when the folks got right above the nest's location, they lay down flat on their stomachs and cautiously inched their way to the very edge of the high cliff. Shh, Dad warned in a low voice. Don't make any noise. Try to see if you can locate the eaglets as quickly as possible. We'll have to get them before the father bird returns, for we won't have a chance after that. And they'll surely freeze to death at night without their mother to keep them warm. There, there they are, whispered Eugenia excitedly. There's the nest right below us. Oh, what a big nest for such little birds. Right you are, Dad exclaimed. But it's farther down than I thought. I'd planned to fasten the rope around a nearby rock, tie it around my waist, and lean over the edge to pick them up. But they're way down on that overhanging ledge. No wonder the eagles picked that spot. They're certainly safe enough there. Looks as if we'll have to leave the poor little fellas after all. Oh no, cried Eugenia. Don't leave them there, Dad. Let me go after them. I'm small enough to go down easily. Tie the rope around me and lower me to the nest. Here, here's the canvas bag you brought to put them in. There's plenty of room to stand on that nest while I pick them up. I'll be careful. Honestly, I will. And there are enough of you to hold the rope. Please, Daddy, please let me. I guess Dad saw that Eugenia really wasn't at all afraid of the high cliff. I know he wouldn't have permitted her to be lowered slowly over its rocky face if he'd felt that any harm would come to her. The boys and Dad hung on tight to the rope. You may be sure, while inch by inch they played it out, Dad said it seemed a long time before Eugenia's "Yoo-hoo, I'm here" floated cheerily up to their straining ears, and he said it seemed even longer before she jerked the rope to signal that she was ready for the return trip. But she got the two eaglets safe and sound. They brought them home where Dad put them up in the big barn hayloft. There they had plenty of space in which to exercise their growing wings and learn to fly. Every day he'd climb the ladder leading up to the loft, carrying their food, jackrabbits or horse meat, obtained from the slaughterhouse. At first, the youngsters used to like to go up to see the birds, but at last Dad had to forbid them to climb the ladder. Why? Cried Harold. Didn't they take good care of the eagles? They took good care of the eagles, smiled George. But the eagles didn't take very good care of the children. Perhaps you mighty birds haven't realized this mighty bird's terrific speed. With wings turned backward and tail spread, it flashes downward with the rapidity and force of an arrow. Its speed and great weight drive its sharp claws full length into its prey, killing the small creature immediately. Thus the eaglets become eagles, and increased rapidly in size. It was dangerous for the children to be near them. At last Dad realized that it was unsafe to keep them longer, for as soon as he raised the trap door, they would swoop down with lightning rapidity upon the food in his hands, and at length even his heavy leather gloves weren't sufficient protection. By this time he'd kept them about 9 months, and he felt that they were now well able to care for themselves. So on a never to be forgotten day our family stood outside and watched as Dad climbed up the ladder, leaning against the barn wall. Breathlessly, they watched while he opened the loft window and released the two eagles, who soared slowly out into the blue freedom above them. They stood silent until the two specks dwindled into nothingness. Then they went quietly into the house. Their two bald eagles were free. "Did your folks ever see the eagles again?" Harold inquired eagerly as George finished his story. "Or did they just fly away and never return?" As I remember Dad's account, he saw the father eagle from time to time, flying here and there as though still looking for his mate. But evidently the young eagles traveled some distance from this section, never to return. "Oh, that was a splendid story," Harold said enthusiastically. "Thank you so very much, Mr. Hibbard. I always look forward to hearing your true nature stories, and I hope that you'll have time to tell me more while I'm in Burns." "I'll be glad to, Harold. It's always a pleasure to have a good listener as you for an audience. Come whenever you can, and bring your friends with you. Next time I'll tell you the story of Dad's winter in the woods and of the faithful friend who saved his life. I doubt that you've ever heard a more heroic story than A Date with Death."